In 1876, along the Arizona Territory frontier, 10-year-old Sam Mitchell witnesses his father's brutal murder by a gang of ruthless outlaws led by Black Jack Morrison. Alone and terrified in the unforgiving wilderness, Sam stumbles upon Aiyana, a 35-year-old Apache warrior who has his own painful history with the white settlers. When Sam desperately pleads for protection, Aiyana's unexpected response sets in motion a journey that will test both their courage and transform their understanding of family, loyalty, and what it truly means to protect someone you love. What begins as a simple request for help becomes an epic tale of survival, revenge, and the unbreakable bonds that can form between the most unlikely of allies. The Arizona sun blazed mercilessly overhead as 10-year-old Samuel Mitchell wiped the sweat from his brow, his small hands gripping the wooden handle of the water bucket. The dusty trail stretched endlessly before their modest wagon, and the boy's legs ached from walking alongside it for hours. "Pa, can I ride in the wagon for a spell?" Sam called out to his father, who sat hunched over the reins, his weathered face scanning the horizon with the wareness of a man who'd seen too much of the frontier's cruelty. Thomas Mitchell, a lean man of 42 with kind eyes and calloused hands, looked down at his son with a gentle smile. "Just a bit further, boy. We'll make camp by that grove of cottonwoods up ahead. Your ma always said the best views come to those who walk the extra mile." Sam's heart clenched at the mention of his mother. Sarah Mitchell had died of fever 3 months ago, leaving father and son to make this desperate journey west to California, where Thomas hoped to find work in the gold fields and start fresh. The boy missed her terribly, her warm laugh, her soft lullabies, the way she could make even hardtack taste like a feast, with her stories. "Tell me again about the ocean, Pa," Sam said, falling into step beside the wagon. "About them waves you saw when you was young." Thomas's eyes softened. Big as mountains they were, green and blue and white all churning together, stretching out further than a man could see. And the sound. He paused, his voice taking on a dreamy quality, like thunder that never stops, but gentle-like. "Your ma always wanted to see it. We'll see it for her, won't we, Pa?" "That we will, son, that we will." The cottonwood grove offered blessed shade as the afternoon wore on. Thomas unhitched their old mare, Bessie, while Sam gathered dried branches for a fire. It was a routine they'd perfected over weeks of travel, father and son moving in harmony, each knowing his part without need for words. "Sam, go fetch some water from that creek," Thomas said, pointing toward a line of green that marked running water about 100 yards from their camp. "But don't you wander off, you hear? These lands can be dangerous for a boy alone." "Yes, Pa." Sam grabbed the bucket and headed toward the creek, his bare feet silent on the sandy ground. The sound of trickling water was music to his ears after the day's dusty travel. As he knelt by the creek's edge, filling the bucket, Sam heard something that made his blood run cold. The thunder of approaching hoofbeats, too many and too fast to be friendly travelers. He crouched low behind a boulder, peering back toward their camp through the tall grass. 5 men on horseback emerged from the desert like specters, their faces hard and their guns drawn. The leader was a massive man with a black beard and cold eyes that seemed to swallow light. Even from this distance, Sam could see the cruel smile playing at his lips. Well, the black-bearded man called out in a voice like gravel, "What have we here?" "A settler and his little wagon train." Thomas straightened slowly, his hand moving instinctively toward the rifle propped against the wagon. "Gentlemen, I don't want any trouble, just passing through with my boy." "Black Jack Morrison's the name," the leader said, dismounting with predatory grace. "And trouble's exactly what we're in the business of. That's a fine wagon you got there. And a decent horse too." "Please," Thomas said, his voice steady despite the fear Sam could hear creeping into it. "We don't have much, but you can take what we got. Just let me and my boy go in peace." Black Jack's laugh was like breaking glass. "Oh, we'll be taking what you got, all right, but I'm afraid you won't be needing it where you're going." Sam watched in frozen horror as his father slowly raised his hands. "My boy's just getting water. He's only 10 years old. Whatever you do to me, please leave him be." "A boy, you say?" Black Jack's eyes gleamed with malicious interest. "Boys can be useful, good for running messages, fetching things." He paused, spitting in the dust. "Or selling to the right people." "No," Thomas said, his voice hardening. "You touch my boy, and you'll what?" Black Jack drew his pistol in one fluid motion. "You ain't in no position to make threats, settler." From his hiding place, Sam could see his father's jaw set in that stubborn way he knew so well. It was the same look Thomas got when he was fixing a broken fence or gentling a spooked horse, determined and unafraid. "That boy is all I got left in this world," Thomas said quietly. "His mother died not 3 months past, and he's seen enough sorrow for one lifetime. If you got any decency left in you." "Decency?" Black Jack's voice rose to a roar. "You settlers burned decency out of me years ago, coming through our territory, stealing our opportunities, thinking you own the whole damn frontier." The other outlaws spread out in a semicircle, their weapons trained on Thomas. Sam recognized the formation. They meant to kill his father, no matter what he said or did. "Where's the boy?" asked one of the outlaws, a thin man with dead eyes and a scar across his cheek. "Probably ran off when he heard us coming," another suggested. "No," Black Jack said thoughtfully. "A 10-year-old wouldn't run far for his pa. He's around here somewhere, watching, probably scared out of his little mind." Sam bit his lip to keep from crying out as Black Jack's gaze swept the area where he was hiding. His heart hammered, so loud he was sure they'd hear it. "Here's what we're gonna do," Black Jack announced. "We're gonna make this real simple for you, settler. You tell us where the boy is, and we'll make it quick. You keep playing hero, and we'll take our time." Thomas looked directly at the boulder where Sam was hidden, and for a moment, their eyes met. In that instant, Sam saw everything his father wanted to say: how much he loved him, how proud he was, how sorry he was that this was happening. Then Thomas did something that would haunt Sam for the rest of his life. He smiled. "You want to know where my boy is?" Thomas asked, his voice suddenly calm. "He's wherever you can't hurt him, and that's all that matters." Black Jack's face twisted with rage. "Wrong answer." The gunshot echoed across the desert like thunder. Sam watched his father fall, watched the light leave his eyes, watched the man who had taught him to whittle and ride and dream of ocean waves become nothing more than still flesh in the dust. The scream that tore from Sam's throat was pure animal anguish. He burst from his hiding place without thinking, running toward his father's body as the outlaws spun toward him. "There's the little rabbit!" Black Jack shouted. "Grab him!" But grief had given Sam desperate strength. He dodged the first man's grasping hands, rolled under a horse's belly, and sprinted toward the desert beyond the camp. Behind him, he could hear cursing and the sound of pursuit, but the cottonwoods and his small size gave him advantages the mounted men didn't have. "Let him go," Black Jack's voice carried across the darkening landscape. "Desert'll kill him anyway. No point wasting bullets on a dead boy." Sam ran until his lungs burned and his legs gave out. He crawled behind a cluster of rocks and pressed his face against the stone, sobbing until no more tears would come. The sun was setting, painting the sky the color of blood, and he was alone in a world that had suddenly become vast and terrible. "Pa," he whispered into the gathering darkness. "Pa, what do I do now?" But the desert offered no answers, only the distant howl of coyotes and the whisper of wind through the sage. Sam curled into a ball and waited for dawn or death, whichever came first. Dawn came slowly to the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that reminded Sam painfully of his mother's hair. He had dozed fitfully against the rocks, jerking awake every time a desert creature rustled nearby or the wind shifted the sagebrush. His throat felt like sandpaper, and the empty water bucket lay somewhere back at the camp, back where his father's body grew cold under the unforgiving stars. Sam pushed the thought away before it could paralyze him again. He had to move, had to find water, had to survive, but as he stood on shaking legs, scanning the endless expanse of desert, stretching in every direction, the hopelessness of his situation crashed over him like a wave. He was 10 years old, alone, with no food, no water, and no idea which direction led to safety. "Think, Sam," he whispered, trying to remember his father's lessons about survival. "Water flows downhill. Look for green things. Listen for birds." He picked a direction that seemed to slope gently downward and began walking, his bare feet already tender from yesterday's flight. The sun climbed higher, and soon sweat beaded on his forehead despite the early hour. By midday he would be in serious trouble if he didn't find shade and water. After an hour of walking, Sam heard it, the blessed sound of trickling water. Following the sound led him to a narrow canyon, where a small spring bubbled from between moss-covered rocks. He threw himself down and drank deeply, then splashed water on his face and neck. It was then that he noticed he wasn't alone. Across the spring, perfectly still as carved stone, sat a man unlike anyone Sam had ever seen. His skin was the color of copper, weathered by sun and wind, and his long black hair was held back by a band of braided leather. He wore buckskin pants and moccasins, with a knife at his belt and a rifle laid across his knees. Most striking were his eyes, dark as midnight and filled with a depth of sadness that seemed to match the emptiness in Sam's own chest. The man had been watching him drink, making no sound, no movement. Sam's first instinct was to run, but exhaustion and grief had stolen his strength. Instead, he sat back on his heels and stared at the man, knowing he was looking at his first Apache. "You are far from any settlement, little one," the man said in accented but clear English. His voice was deep and calm, like distant thunder. "Yes, sir," Sam whispered, his mouth suddenly dry again despite the water he'd consumed. "Where is your family?" The question hit Sam like a physical blow. Fresh tears spilled down his cheeks as the previous day's horror crashed over him again. "Dead," he managed to choke out. The Apache's expression didn't change, but something shifted in those dark eyes, a recognition of shared pain that Sam was too young to fully understand. "Who killed him?" "Black Jack Morrison and his men. They shot him down like a dog." Sam's voice broke on the words, "I hid by the creek like a coward while they murdered him." "You were not a coward," the man said quietly. "You were smart. A dead son cannot honor his father's memory." "I don't know how to honor him," Sam sobbed. "I don't know how to do anything. I'm just a kid, and now I'm gonna die out here too." The Apache studied him for a long moment, then set his rifle aside and moved with fluid grace around the spring. Up close, Sam could see the scars that marked his arms and chest, evidence of battles fought and survived. Despite his fear, there was something in the man's presence that felt safe. "I am called Aiyana," the Apache said, settling cross-legged beside the spring. "It means eternal blossom in my tongue, though I have seen little blooming in recent years. I'm Sam Mitchell." "Sam Mitchell," Aiyana repeated, as if testing the name. "And you are 10 summers old." "Yes, sir." "How did you—" "Your size tells me much, as does your courage in speaking to me, despite your fear." Aiyana's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "Many grown men would have run screaming at the sight of me. My pa taught me that running don't solve much," Sam said, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "He said a man faces his troubles head-on, even when he's scared. Your father was wise." They sat in silence for several minutes, the only sound the gentle babbling of the spring and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Sam found himself studying Aiyana's face, seeing lines of grief there that mirrored his own pain. "Aiyana," Sam finally said, his voice small and uncertain. I got nowhere to go, no family left, no money, no nothing. Those men might still be looking for me, and I don't know how to survive out here alone." Aiyana nodded slowly, The desert is not forgiving to those unprepared for her ways. Sam took a shaking breath, gathering courage for what he was about to ask. Everything his father had taught him about pride and self-reliance warred with the desperate reality of his situation. But survival trumped pride, and his father would want him to live. "They took my father," Sam said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Can you protect me?" The words hung in the air between them like a bridge, waiting to be crossed. Aiyana's dark eyes studied Sam's face, reading something there that the boy himself didn't fully understand. "You ask this of an Apache warrior," Aiyana said slowly. "My people and yours have been enemies for generations. White settlers have taken our lands, killed our children, driven us from places sacred to our ancestors." Sam's heart sank. Of course, why would this man help him? He was just another white settler's son, part of the tide of humanity that had brought nothing but trouble to the Apache people. But then Aiyana continued, his voice taking on a different quality, softer, more personal. "Yet you are not the men who took my daughter." The words hit Sam like a physical blow. Daughter, this man had lost a child too. She was 8 summers. Aiyana continued, his gaze fixed on something far beyond the canyon walls. "Taken by soldiers 3 winters past. They said she would be given a good home, taught the white man's ways, made civilized." The word dripped with bitter irony. "I have searched for her since that day, following every rumor, every whispered word. Always she is just beyond my reach." "I'm sorry," Sam whispered, meaning it with every fiber of his being. Aiyana's eyes focused on him again, and Sam saw a decision forming in their depths, one that would change both their lives forever. "You ask if I can protect you, Sam Mitchell, but protection is not something given lightly. It requires trust on both sides, sacrifice, and the willingness to face dangers together." Aiyana paused, choosing his words carefully. "If I agree to this thing you ask, you must understand, I am not taking on a burden. I am choosing a son." The word son hit Sam harder than any physical blow could have. Here was this man, this enemy of his people by all accounts, offering him not just protection, but family. It was more than he had dared hope for. And yet, "But I'm white," Sam said, confusion and hope warring in his voice. "And I am Apache," Aiyana replied. Perhaps it is time such things mattered less than the heart of a man or boy. Sam stared at this warrior who had just offered to become his father, this stranger who understood loss in a way few others could. In Aiyana's face, he saw strength and wisdom, but also the same desperate need for family that gnawed at his own heart. If I say yes," Sam asked carefully, "what happens then?" Aiyana smiled, the first genuine smile Sam had seen from him, and it transformed his entire face. "Then we begin a journey unlike any either of us has traveled before. I will teach you the ways of the desert, how to track and hunt, how to read the signs that mean life or death in this harsh land. You will learn to move like shadow, to find water where others see only stone, to speak with the spirits of this place." He paused, his expression growing serious again. "But first we will find the men who killed your father, and we will make them answer for their crimes." Sam felt something kindle in his chest, not just hope, but something fiercer, purpose. "You do that, for me?" "A father protects his son," Aiyana said simply, "and a son must see justice done for his blood father, or the spirits will never let him rest." The boy looked into those dark, understanding eyes and made his choice. He had asked for protection, but what Aiyana offered was so much more. It was rebirth, belonging, and the chance to become something stronger than his grief. "Yes," Sam said, his voice firm despite his tears. "Yes, I want that. I want to be your son." Aiyana reached out and placed a calloused hand on Sam's shoulder. The touch was gentle but strong, and Sam felt some of the cold emptiness inside him begin to warm. "Then we are family, Sam Mitchell, and family stands together, no matter what storms may come." As the Apache warrior, pulled him into an embrace that smelled of leather and sage and wild freedom. Sam closed his eyes and felt, for the first time since his father's death, that he might actually survive what lay ahead. He had no idea that their journey would test them both in ways neither could imagine, or that the bond forming between them would ultimately challenge everything they thought they knew about loyalty, love, and what it truly means to protect someone with your whole heart. The next 3 weeks passed like a fever dream for Sam, each day bringing lessons that would have seemed impossible in his old life. Aiyana proved to be a patient but demanding teacher, and Sam discovered reserves of strength and determination he never knew he possessed. "Your feet sound like a buffalo stampede," Aiyana said on their 5th morning together, watching Sam attempt to move silently through a grove of mesquite trees. "The desert has ears, little brother. Every creature within a mile knows exactly where you are." Sam had taken to calling Aiyana his Apache father, while Aiyana called him little brother. A term that he explained showed both affection and respect among his people. It was different from the white man's way of thinking about family, but Sam found it comforting. "How do you do it?" Sam asked, frustrated. "You move like you're floating." Aiyana smiled and demonstrated, his feet seeming to barely touch the ground as he glided between the thorny branches without disturbing so much as a leaf. "Feel the earth speak to you. Each step is a conversation. Ask her permission before you take it." It sounded mystical and impossible, but gradually Sam began to understand. It was about reading the ground, testing each footfall, distributing his weight differently. By the end of the week he could move through the desert with only half the noise he'd made before. The lessons went far beyond simple movement. Aiyana taught him to read tracks in the sand, not just human footprints, but the subtle signs that told stories of every creature that had passed. A broken twig here, a displaced stone there, the pattern of disturbed earth that revealed whether a horse was lame or carrying a heavy load. "See this?" Aiyana pointed to what looked like unmarked ground, to Sam's untrained eye. 3 men passed here yesterday morning, 2 on horseback, 1 walking. The walking man limps. His left leg is shorter than his right. See how his tracks favor the right side. And here, he indicated a small depression in the sand. One of the horses needs new shoes. The worn shoe leaves a different mark. Sam stared at the ground, slowly beginning to make out the patterns Aiyana described. It was like learning to read a new language, one written in dust and stone, rather than ink and paper. But the most important lessons came in the quiet moments, when they sat by their small, smokeless fires, and Aiyana shared pieces of his past. "My daughter," Aiyana said one evening, as they watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky, "was called Itzel. It means rainbow in the old tongue. She had your courage, little brother, but also your mother's stubbornness." "How do you know about my mother's stubbornness?" Sam asked, surprised. Aiyana's eyes twinkled. "The way you set your jaw when you're determined to master something difficult. It's not your father's way. I can tell from how you describe him. That comes from her." It was true. Sam's mother had been famously stubborn about everything from keeping a clean house to making sure Sam knew his letters. His father had always said it was one of the things he loved most about her. "Tell me more about Etzel," Sam said softly. "She could climb like a mountain goat and had no fear of heights. Once, when she was 6, she climbed to the very top of a sacred rock formation to retrieve a hawk's feather. The elders said it was impossible. The rock was smooth as glass, but Itzel found handholds where others saw none." Aiyana's voice grew heavy with memory. "The soldiers came for the children during the night. They said it was for our own good, that the children would be educated, taught to live in the white world, but we knew better. We knew they meant to kill the Apache in them, to make them forget their names, their language, their people. Did you fight?" "Yes, but there were too many, and they had better weapons. They took 17 children that night." Itzel was the youngest, his fist clenched unconsciously. "I followed them for 3 days before losing the trail at a river crossing. Since then, I have searched every town, every school, every place where they might have taken her." Sam felt his own fist clench in sympathy. "We'll find her," he said with fierce conviction. "After we find Black Jack Morrison, we'll find Itzel too." Aiyana looked at him with something approaching wonder. "You would do this? Help me search for my daughter?" "Family helps family," Sam said, unconsciously echoing words Aiyana had spoken to him. "You're teaching me to survive, to be bold. The least I can do is help you find your little girl." Something passed between them in that moment, a deepening of the bond that had formed by the spring. They were no longer just protector and protected, but true family in every way that mattered. The next morning brought their first real test. Sam woke to find Aiyana crouched beside their cold fire pit, studying the ground with intense concentration. Even with his newly learned skills, Sam could see the signs clearly. Horses, many of them, had passed nearby during the night. "How many?" Sam whispered. 8, maybe 9. Heavily loaded, probably carrying supplies. Aiyana's voice was grim, and heading toward Copper Creek settlement. Sam's blood ran cold. Copper Creek was where they'd been heading to stock up on supplies and gather information about Black Jack Morrison's gang. If these were Morrison's men, could be them, Sam asked. The track spacing suggests they're in no hurry, which means they feel safe. Either they own this territory. Aiyana paused, reading something in the tracks that Sam couldn't see, or they're planning something that requires patience. They broke camp quickly and followed the trail, Aiyana setting a pace that would have been punishing for Sam 3 weeks ago, but now felt natural. The tracks led toward a low ridge that overlooked Copper Creek, and as they climbed toward the crest, Aiyana held up a hand for silence. They crawled the last 50 yards on their bellies, and what they saw when they peered over the ridge made Sam's heart stop. Copper Creek was burning. Smoke rose from a dozen buildings, and even from this distance they could see bodies scattered in the dusty main street. The riders they'd been tracking were there, methodically looting what remained of the settlement. And at their head, unmistakable even at this distance, was the massive figure of Black Jack Morrison. "My God," Sam breathed, "they're monsters." Aiyana's face was carved from stone, but Sam could see the rage burning in his dark eyes. 23 people lived in Copper Creek," he said quietly. "I traded there many times. They were good people. They treated me fairly when others would not." Sam watched his Apache father's hands clench and unclench, saw the internal war being fought between the desire for immediate action and the wisdom of restraint. Finally, Aiyana backed away from the ridge and motioned for Sam to follow. "We cannot help them now," he said when they were safely out of earshot, "but we can make sure this never happens again." "How?" Aiyana's smile was cold as winter wind. "By becoming the thing these men fear most. Shadows that hunt shadows, ghosts that give them no peace until they face justice." "You mean we're going to track them?" "More than track them, little brother. We are going to become their nightmare. Every camp they make will be watched, every move anticipated. We will take their supplies, spook their horses, turn them against each other with fear and paranoia." Sam felt a chill run down his spine, not of fear, but of anticipation. "And then we will give them a choice," Aiyana said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "Surrender and face the law, or face us. Either way, their days of murdering innocent people are numbered." As they made their way down from the ridge, Sam realized that his Apache father had just declared war on Black Jack Morrison and his entire gang. It should have terrified him, but instead he felt a fierce joy spreading through his chest. Justice was coming for his father's killers, and he would be part of delivering it. The boy who had hidden by a creek while his father died was gone forever. In his place walked someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. Someone who had learned the ways of the desert from a master, and who carried both love and vengeance in his heart like twin flames. Black Jack Morrison had made the mistake of leaving a witness alive. Soon he would learn the true cost of that error. But first, Sam and Aiyana had to become something neither of them had ever been before. Hunters of men, dealers in justice, and the last thing Blackjack's victims would see reflected in their killer's eye. The education of Sam Mitchell was about to take a very dark turn. The Ghost War began 3 days after Copper Creek burned. Sam crouched in a stand of Palo Verde trees, his breathing steady and silent as Aiyana had taught him, watching Blackjack Morrison's camp through the pre-dawn darkness. 9 men slept around the dying embers of their fire, their horses picketed nearby, their weapons carelessly scattered. They felt safe. That was their first mistake. Aiyana materialized beside him like morning mist, moving so quietly that even Sam, who had been expecting him, barely detected his approach. His Apache father's face was painted with ash and clay in patterns that seemed to make him blend with the shadows themselves. "The sentries," Sam whispered, his voice barely audible. "Sleeping," Aiyana replied with contempt. "These men have grown fat on easy prey. They have forgotten that the hunter can become the hunted." For 3 days they had been tracking Morrison's gang across the desert, learning their habits, their weaknesses, their fears. The outlaws moved with the arrogance of men who believed themselves untouchable, making camp wherever they pleased, building large fires, talking loudly into the night. They had no idea death was watching them from the darkness. "Remember the plan," Aiyana said, his hand briefly touching Sam's shoulder. "Quick and silent. Take only what we discussed. No heroics. Little brother, we are not here to fight today, but to plant seeds of fear." Sam nodded, his heart racing with nervous energy. This was their first strike against Morrison's gang, the beginning of a campaign that would either see justice done or get them both killed. There was no middle ground. They moved like shadows down toward the camp, splitting up as planned. Aiyana would handle the horses while Sam dealt with the weapons. It was dangerous work. If even one of the outlaws woke, they would be trapped in the open with nowhere to run. Sam reached the edge of the camp and froze as one of the sleeping men muttered in his dreams, and rolled over. The outlaw's face was revealed in the dying firelight, a thin man with a scar across his cheek. Sam recognized him as the one who had suggested Blackjack's victims, probably ran off when they were looking for him at his father's murder scene. For a moment, hatred so pure it was almost physical coursed through Sam's small frame. It would be so easy to take the knife Aiyana had given him, so satisfying to know. Aiyana had been clear about this. Revenge served cold. Was revenge served best? Their time would come, but not yet. Moving with painstaking care, Sam began gathering weapons from around the sleeping outlaws. Pistols from holsters, rifles leaning against saddles, even the knife from Scarface's belt. His father had been a careful man who taught his son to handle guns responsibly, but this felt different, like he was dismantling the very tools of evil. A low whistle, Aiyana's signal that he was finished with the horses. Sam gathered the last of the weapons and melted back into the darkness, his heart hammering against his ribs. They met at their predetermined rendezvous point, half a mile from the camp, and Aiyana examined Sam's haul with approval. "Good work, little brother. Clean and quiet." He held up several cut hobbles and lead ropes. "Their horses will scatter with the first loud noise. Without weapons or mounts, they become what they have made others, helpless prey. How long before they realize what happened? Dawn, when they wake to find themselves defenseless in Apache country." Aiyana's smile was sharp as a blade. "But that is only the beginning. Fear is like a seed. Plant it properly, and it grows into terror." They retreated to a rocky outcropping that gave them a clear view of Morrison's camp and settled in to wait. The sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky pink when the first shouts of alarm echoed across the desert. "What the hell?" Blackjack's roar carried clearly in the still air. "Where are our damn guns?" The camp exploded into chaos as the outlaws stumbled around, searching for their missing weapons. When they tried to catch their scattered horses, the animals spooked and ran, leaving the men stranded and increasingly panicked. "Indians," one of them shouted. "Has to be Indians. They took everything." "Shut up," Blackjack bellowed. But Sam could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Could be anybody. Could be lawmen. Or, lawmen don't fight like ghosts. Scarface interrupted, his voice shrill with fear. They announce themselves. Try to arrest us. This is something else. Something worse. From their hiding place, Aiyana watched the chaos with grim satisfaction. See how quickly brave men become children when they cannot understand their enemy, he murmured. We have taken more than their weapons. We have taken their confidence. But Black Jack was made of sterner stuff than his men. After the initial panic, he began restoring order through sheer force of will and liberal use of his fists. Listen to me, you cowards, he shouted, backhanding one of the more hysterical outlaws. Whoever did this is still out there, probably watching us right now, but they're just men. They bleed and die like anyone else. He pointed toward the rocky hills where Sam and Aiyana were concealed. They're up there somewhere, feeling real proud of themselves. But they made one mistake. They left us alive. Sam felt a chill run down his spine. Even stripped of weapons and horses, Black Jack Morrison was still dangerous. There was something in the man's voice, a cold intelligence beneath the brutality, that reminded Sam uncomfortably of a cornered wolf. What do we do now? Scarface asked, nursing a split lip from his leader's attention. We walk, Black Jack said simply. There's a trading post about 10 miles south. Old Pedro's place. We get new guns, new horses, and then we hunt down whoever did this. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried clearly in the desert air. And when we find them, we're going to take our time making them sorry they ever crossed Black Jack Morrison. The outlaws began gathering what few supplies they had left and prepared to march south under the blazing sun. Without horses or adequate water, it would be a brutal journey, but Sam could see they were more afraid of their leader than of the desert. As the gang disappeared over a distant ridge, Aiyana stood and stretched. Phase 1 is complete, he said with satisfaction. Now we begin Phase 2, which is, we make sure they never reach Pedro's trading post. For the next 2 days, Sam learned what it meant to wage war. Apache style, they didn't attack directly. Instead, they became the desert itself, striking without warning and vanishing like smoke. They poisoned waterholes, just enough to cause violent sickness but not death. They stampeded the few wild horses the outlaws tried to catch. They started rock slides that forced the gang to take longer, more difficult routes through the broken country. Most unsettling of all, they left signs. Aiyana taught Sam to arrange stones in patterns that meant nothing to white men, but spoke volumes in the ancient language of the desert tribes. Warnings, promises, prophecies of doom for those who brought violence to peaceful people. The Apache have always understood psychological warfare. Aiyana explained as they placed another stone message where the outlaws couldn't miss it. Break a man's spirit, and his body will follow. These symbols will mean nothing to Morrison, but his men will see them and remember every story they've ever heard about Apache magic. By the third day, the effect was evident. Through their telescope, taken from Morrison's own saddlebags during the first raid, they could see the gang was falling apart. 2 men were violently ill from bad water. 3 others had developed a near-constant nervous twitch, jumping at every shadow. Even Black Jack himself had begun looking over his shoulder constantly. They're starting to crack, Sam observed, watching Scarface argue with another outlaw about which direction to go. Yes, but Morrison is still holding them together through fear of him rather than us, Aiyana replied. We need to change that balance. It's time for them to see us. See us. Aiyana's smile was predatory, not close enough to catch, but close enough to know we're real. Close enough to understand that death is stalking them with patience and purpose. That evening, as Morrison's gang huddled around a pathetically small fire in a narrow canyon, Sam got his first taste of true psychological warfare. Aiyana had positioned them on the canyon rim, just visible in the flickering shadows if someone knew where to look. As the outlaws settled in for another miserable night, Aiyana began to sing. It was an Apache death song, low and mournful and utterly alien to white ears. The words meant nothing to the outlaws below, but the tone was unmistakable. It was the sound of judgment coming, of spirits preparing to collect what was owed. The effect on Morrison's men was electric. They leaped to their feet, spinning wildly as they tried to locate the source of the haunting melody. But Aiyana had chosen their position perfectly. The canyon walls created echoes that made it impossible to pinpoint the singer's location. "Show yourself," Black Jack roared into the darkness. "Come down here and fight like a man." Aiyana's only response was to sing louder, and now Sam joined in with a harmony his Apache father had taught him. Two voices weaving together in an ancient song of justice and retribution, floating down from the darkness like the voices of the dead. One of the outlaws broke. Sam watched through the telescope as the man grabbed what few supplies he could carry and stumbled out of the canyon, preferring to take his chances alone in the desert rather than face whatever was hunting them. "That's 7, Aiyana murmured with satisfaction. "Fear is contagious, little brother. Soon they will all scatter like leaves in a strong wind." But as they watched Black Jack restore order once again through violence and intimidation, Sam realized something that chilled him to the bone. Morrison wasn't just holding his gang together through fear, he was learning from their attacks. Each day, he adapted a little more, became a little more cautious, a little more dangerous. The war of nerves was working, but their enemy was evolving too. Soon, they would have to face him directly. And when that moment came, only one side would walk away. The education of Sam Mitchell was about to take another dark turn, from psychological warfare to the real thing. And despite all of Aiyana's training, he was still just a 10-year-old boy preparing to face the most dangerous outlaw in the Arizona territory. The question wasn't whether he was ready for that confrontation. The question was whether anyone could. The abandoned mine shaft yawned like a mouth in the desert floor, its wooden support beams weathered gray by years of sun and wind. Sam crouched at its edge, peering into the darkness below, while his heart hammered against his ribs. "Are you certain this will work?" he whispered to Aiyana, who knelt beside him like a statue carved from shadow and determination. "Certainty is a luxury we cannot afford, little brother," Aiyana replied, his dark eyes fixed on the distant dust cloud that marked Black Jack Morrison's approach. "But sometimes the best trap is the one your enemy thinks he has set for you." After a week of psychological warfare, Morrison's gang had been whittled down to just 4 men. The outlaw leader himself, Scarface, and 2 others whose nerves hadn't quite snapped under the constant pressure. But rather than making them weaker, the smaller group had become more focused, more dangerous. 3 days ago, they had stopped running. Instead, Morrison had found this old mining claim and turned it into a fortress. He'd positioned his men with clear fields of fire, set up watch schedules that left no blind spots, and most cunningly of all, he'd started leaving signs of his own. Messages scratched into rocks, arrows made of stones pointing toward the mine, even a crudely drawn map that seemed to show escape routes from the area. To anyone tracking them, it would look like Morrison was planning something big and getting sloppy about covering his track. "He wants us to come here," Sam had realized when they first discovered the signs. "He's trying to lure us into a trap." "Yes," Aiyana had agreed, "which is why we are going to give him exactly what he wants." The plan was audacious even by Apache standards. They would let Morrison think his trap was working, walking openly into his kill zone, but with their own surprise waiting in the darkness below. The mine shaft was deeper than it looked, dropping nearly 40 feet before opening into a network of tunnels that honeycombed the hillside. More importantly, there was another entrance on the far side of the hill, one Morrison didn't know about. "Remember," Aiyana said as the dust cloud drew closer, "everything depends on timing. When you hear my signal, you have exactly 30 seconds to reach the rope and begin your descent." Sam nodded, though his mouth felt dry as desert sand. The plan required him to act as bait, showing himself just long enough to draw Morrison's fire before disappearing into the mine shaft. Meanwhile, Aiyana would circle around to the hidden entrance and position himself in the tunnels below. When Morrison inevitably came after them, thinking he had them trapped underground, he would find himself caught between two hunters in a maze he didn't understand. It was brilliant in its simplicity. If everything went perfectly, "They're coming," Aiyana announced, pointing toward a rise where 4 mounted figures had just appeared. Even at this distance, Blackjack Morrison's massive frame was unmistakable. "Sam," Aiyana said, his voice suddenly gentle, "before this begins, I need you to know something. Whatever happens today, you have already honored your father's memory. You are no longer the frightened boy who hid by the creek. You have become a warrior." The words hit Sam like a physical blow, but not with pain, with strength. In Aiyana's eyes he saw not just approval, but genuine pride, the look a father gives a son who has grown beyond his wildest expectations. "And you," Sam replied, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice, "you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. A family, a home, a reason to keep fighting." They clasped hands briefly, a gesture that spoke volumes without need for more words. Then Aiyana melted away into the landscape, moving with the supernatural stealth that had made Apache warriors legendary throughout the Southwest. Sam settled into position behind a boulder near the mine entrance, checking his weapons one final time. Aiyana had given him a Colt 45, taken from Morrison's own men, and weeks of practice had made him reasonably proficient with it. More importantly, he carried the knowledge his Apache father had drilled into him. Patience, positioning, and the element of surprise were worth more than any gun. Morrison's gang approached cautiously, clearly expecting trouble but not sure what form it would take. They had learned respect for their invisible enemies over the past weeks, even if they hadn't learned wisdom. When they were about 200 yards away, Sam made his move. He rose from behind the boulder just long enough to be seen, then immediately ducked back down as gunfire erupted from Morrison's position. Bullets whined off the rocks around him, but he was already moving, sprinting toward the mine entrance in a weaving pattern that made him a difficult target. "There," Blackjack's voice boomed across the desert. "The little rat's heading for that mine. We got him trapped now." More gunfire followed, forcing Sam to dive and roll behind another boulder. A bullet tugged at his sleeve, close enough that he could feel the heat of its passage, but his father's training held firm. "Stay low. Stay moving. Don't give them a stationary target." He reached the mine entrance and paused just long enough to look back. Morrison's gang was dismounting, spreading out in a classic flanking pattern designed to prevent escape from the shaft. They thought they had him cornered like a rabbit in a hole. Sam grabbed the rope they had rigged earlier and rappelled into the darkness, his feet finding the rough wooden ladder that descended into the mine's depths. Above him he could hear Morrison shouting orders to his men. "Careful now. Could be more than one of them down there. Thompson, you watch the entrance. Nobody comes up without us knowing about it." The mine shaft was a world of shadows and strange echoes, lit only by the circle of sky far above. Sam moved quickly but quietly through the tunnels, guided by the chalk marks Aiyana had left during their earlier scouting mission. The main tunnel branched into 3 smaller passages about halfway down. Sam took the middle one, which curved back toward the hidden entrance, where Aiyana would be waiting. If everything went according to plan, Morrison would follow him into this maze, thinking he was hunting one frightened boy. Instead, he would find himself caught in a crossfire with nowhere to run. The sound of boots on the wooden ladder announced Morrison's descent. Sam pressed himself against the tunnel wall, hardly daring to breathe as he listened to the outlaws make their way down into the mine. "Spread out," Morrison's voice echoed through the tunnels. "Kid can't have gone far. These old mines are death traps. One wrong turn and you're lost forever." "Boss," came Scarface's nervous voice, "maybe we should just wait him out, block the entrance and let him escape through some other hole we don't know about." "No. We finish this here and now. I'm tired of being hunted by ghosts and children." Sam heard them moving through the tunnels, their boots loud in the confined space. Morrison was right about one thing. The mine was dangerous, with unstable passages and sudden drops. that could kill the unwary. But that danger cut both ways. A low whistle echoed through the tunnels. Aiyana signaled that he was in position. Now came the most dangerous part of the plan. Sam deliberately kicked a loose stone, sending it clattering down the tunnel. The sound would draw Morrison's men toward him, but it would also reveal his position to their guns. "This way," Morrison roared. "I heard something." Footsteps pounded through the tunnels, coming fast. Sam waited until he could see the flicker of torchlight on the tunnel walls, then fired 2 quick shots before ducking back around a corner. The answering gunfire was tremendous in the confined space, muzzle flashes lighting up the tunnel like lightning. But Sam was already moving, using his smaller size and knowledge of the tunnel layout to stay ahead of his pursuers. "He's heading deeper," one of the outlaws shouted. Got him running scared, but as Morrison and his men rounded the corner in pursuit, they ran straight into Aiyana's crossfire. The Apache warrior materialized from a side passage like an avenging spirit, his rifle speaking death in the darkness. One of Morrison's men went down immediately, crying out as he fell. Another spun and fired wildly, his shots going wide in the poor light. "It's a trap," Scarface screamed. "They led us down here to kill us." The tunnel became a maze of chaos, gunfire, shouting, the echo of bullets ricocheting off stone walls. In the confined space, it was almost impossible to tell where shots were coming from or going to. But Morrison proved why he had survived so long in a profession where most men died young. Instead of panicking, he began barking orders that restored some semblance of tactics to the fight. "Fall back to the main tunnel. Watch your crossfire. Thompson, get to higher ground and give us covering fire." Sam found himself pressed against a tunnel wall as bullets whined past his head. This was nothing like their careful psychological warfare. This was brutal, immediate, and deadly. One mistake would end everything. A hand grabbed his shoulder, and he spun, gun ready, before recognizing Aiyana in the flickering light. "We have them pinned," his Apache father whispered, "but they're fighting like cornered wolves. Morrison is trying to retreat to a defensible position. Do we let him?" Aiyana's smile was grim. "No, little brother. Today, Black Jack Morrison learns that some debts can only be paid in blood." What happened next would haunt Sam's dreams for years to come. But in that moment, all he felt was the cold certainty that justice was finally at hand. The real battle was just beginning. The mine tunnel reeked of gunpowder and fear. Sam pressed his back against the rough stone wall, listening to the desperate whispers of Morrison's surviving men echoing through the darkness. 2 were dead, their bodies cooling in the narrow passages. That left Morrison, Scarface, and 1 other, cornered but still dangerous. "Little brother," Aiyana's voice was barely a breath in the darkness beside him. "They are planning something. Listen." Sam strained his ears and caught fragments of Morrison's voice from around the bend. "Set charges. Bring the whole damn place down. Better to die fighting than dynamite," Sam whispered, his blood turning to ice water. Aiyana nodded grimly. Mining camps always keep explosives. If Morrison brought some down with them, the implication hung in the air like smoke. Morrison was desperate enough to collapse the mine rather than let them escape. It would be suicide, but it would take Sam and Aiyana with him, and for a man like Black Jack Morrison, that might be victory enough. "We have to stop him," Sam said, checking his remaining ammunition. 3 bullets left in his gun, and no way to know how many rounds Aiyana had remaining. "Yes, but carefully. A desperate man with explosives is more dangerous than a dozen with guns." Aiyana paused, listening to the continued whispers from ahead. "There is another way. These old mines often connect to natural caves. If we can reach the surface through a different route." "No," Sam's voice was quiet but firm. "I won't run from him again. Not after what he did to Pa, to all those people in Copper Creek. This ends here." Aiyana studied his face in the dim light filtering down from above. What he saw there made him nod slowly. "Then we finish it. But we do it smart. Apache smart." The plan they formulated was born of desperation and the kind of cold calculation that only comes from weeks of hunting and being hunted. Morrison expected them to either attack directly or try to escape. Instead, they would do neither. They would make him come to them. Sam moved deeper into the mine, making just enough noise to be tracked but not enough to reveal his exact position. Meanwhile, Aiyana circled through a connecting passage, positioning himself where Morrison would least expect him. The psychological warfare that had served them so well above ground would serve them one final time below. "Morrison," Sam called out, his young voice echoing through the tunnels. "You killed my father. That you, boy?" Morrison's reply came from somewhere ahead, thick with satisfaction. "Been wondering when you'd show yourself. That Apache friend of yours teach you to hide like a coward?" "He taught me to hunt," Sam replied, moving again as soon as the words left his mouth. "In these tunnels, staying in one place too long was death. He taught me that some men ain't worth more than the dirt they're buried in." Morrison's laughter was like breaking glass. Big words from a little rat hiding in the dark. "You want to avenge Daddy? Come and try." The sound of movement echoed through the tunnels. Boots on stone, the scrape of weapons being readied. Morrison was advancing, but carefully using his remaining men as shields, while he stayed back with whatever explosive surprise he'd prepared. Sam reached the chamber he and Aiyana had selected, a natural cave that opened into 3 different tunnel mouths. It would give Morrison multiple angles of attack, making him confident, but it would also spread his forces thin. "I'm waiting for you," Sam called out, settling into position behind a fallen beam. His hands were steady now, the fear burned away by weeks of training and the cold fire of righteous anger. The first man to emerge from the tunnels was Scarface, his weapon sweeping the chamber nervously. Sam could see the terror in the outlaw's eyes. Weeks of psychological warfare had left their mark. The man was jumping at shadows, expecting death to emerge from every corner. He wasn't wrong. Aiyana's shot came from a tunnel mouth. Scarface hadn't even considered, taking the outlaw in the chest and spinning him around. The man's scream echoed through the chamber as he fell, his weapon clattering away into the darkness. "Jesus!" the third outlaw shouted from somewhere in the tunnels. "They're everywhere. Shut up and keep moving." Morrison roared. "It's just 2 of them. We got them outnumbered." But numbers meant nothing in this confined space, where shadows played tricks, and every sound echoed from a dozen directions. The third outlaw appeared at a different tunnel mouth, firing wildly at where he thought Aiyana's shot had come from. His bullet struck stone and ricocheted dangerously, filling the air with flying fragments. Sam waited until the man was reloading, then stepped from cover and put a bullet center mass. The outlaw dropped like a sack of grain, his unfired cartridges spilling across the cave floor. "Just you and me now, Morrison," Sam called out. "Come and get me." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Morrison's voice drifted from the main tunnel, different now, calmer, more calculating. "You know what, boy? You're right. It is just you and me now, and I got something here that's going to settle this once and for all." The smell hit Sam first, the distinctive sulfur scent of a lit fuse. Then Morrison stepped into the chamber, and Sam's heart stopped. The outlaw leader was holding a stick of dynamite, its fuse burning steadily down toward the explosive. His other hand held a gun pointed directly at Sam's hiding place. "Here's how this plays out," Morrison said conversationally. "You and your Apache friend come out with your hands up, or I drop this little present right here in the middle of the cave. Either way, I get my revenge, but if you surrender, maybe you get to live a few minutes longer." Sam felt sweat beading on his forehead. The fuse was already half burned, maybe 20 seconds before the dynamite exploded. In this enclosed space, it would bring down half the mountain. "What's it going to be, boy?" From somewhere in the darkness, Aiyana's voice spoke with quiet dignity. "We do not surrender to murderers." Morrison's grin was visible even in the dim light. "Then we all die together. At least I'll have the satisfaction of—" The shot came from directly above. Morrison spun, looking up in shock as dirt and pebbles rained down from a hole in the cave ceiling. Aiyana had found another route, through the natural cave system that connected to the mine shafts. In the moment of Morrison's distraction, Sam moved. He lunged forward, not toward cover, but toward Morrison himself, tackling the big man around the knees. They went down hard, the dynamite flying from Morrison's grasp to land somewhere in the darkness. Sam could hear it rolling, the fuse still burning, but he couldn't see where it had gone. Morrison was twice his size and 3 times his weight, but desperation gave Sam strength. They rolled across the cave floor, fighting for control of Morrison's gun. The outlaw's fist caught Sam in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs, but he held on with grim determination. "Should have minded your own business, boy," Morrison snarled, trying to bring his gun to bear. "You made it my business when you killed my father." Sam shot back, managing to knock the weapon from Morrison's grip. They were fighting blind now, rolling and grappling in the darkness while the dynamite fuse burned somewhere nearby. Sam could smell it getting closer to the charge, could almost feel death approaching with each passing second. Then Aiyana was there, dropping through the hole in the ceiling like an avenging angel. His knife gleamed in the faint light as he landed on Morrison's back, but the outlaw was far from finished. Morrison threw himself backward, slamming Aiyana against the cave wall. The Apache warrior's grunt of pain echoed through the chamber, and Sam saw the knife skitter away into the shadows. "Thought you were so smart," Morrison panted, scrambling for his fallen gun. "Thought you could hunt Blackjack Morrison like some animal. But I'm still standing and you're all about to." The explosion, when it came, was not what any of them expected. Instead of the devastating blast that would have collapsed the cave, there was only a muffled pop from somewhere deep in the tunnels. The dynamite had rolled down a shaft, and the solid rock had contained most of the explosion. But the psychological effect was electric. Morrison froze, expecting death, and in that moment of hesitation, Sam acted. He lunged for Morrison's gun, his small hands closing around the grip, just as the outlaw realized his mistake. They struggled for control of the weapon, but Sam's weeks of training had made him stronger, faster, more determined than the frightened boy who had watched his father die. The gun discharged once, the shot echoing through the cave like thunder. Then there was silence. Blackjack Morrison lay still on the cave floor, his eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling. The man who had terrorized the Arizona Territory, who had murdered innocent people for profit and pleasure, was finally dead. Sam sat back on his heels, the smoking gun heavy in his hands, and felt empty. He had expected triumph, satisfaction, the sweet taste of revenge finally served. Instead, all he felt was a bone-deep weariness and the terrible knowledge that killing, even justified killing, left scars on the soul. "It's over, little brother," Aiyana said gently, kneeling beside him. "Your father can rest in peace now." "Why don't I feel better?" Sam whispered. "Why does it still hurt so much?" Aiyana's weathered hand settled on his shoulder. "Because you are not a killer by nature. The pain you feel is proof that your spirit remains pure, despite what you have had to." They sat in the darkness for a long moment, listening to the distant drip of water and the whisper of air through the tunnels. The war was over. Justice had been served, but Sam knew that in some ways the hardest part was just beginning. Learning to live with what he had done, learning to find peace after so much violence, learning to build a future from the ashes of his past. But as Aiyana helped him to his feet and they began the long climb toward daylight, Sam realized something that warmed the cold place in his chest. He wouldn't have to learn those lessons alone. 3 months after Blackjack Morrison's death, Sam stood at the edge of a bustling frontier town called Prescott, watching children play in the dusty streets. His hair had grown longer under Aiyana's patient teaching, and his skin had darkened from countless days under the desert sun. To most observers, he looked like what he had become, a child of 2 worlds, equally at home in Apache buckskins and white man's clothes. But today, as he watched those children laugh and play, all he could think about was a little Apache girl named Itzel, who should have been running free in the mountains instead of trapped somewhere in the white world's machinery of forced civilization. "Any luck?" Aiyana asked, emerging from the government building where he'd been questioning officials about missing Indian children. His face was carefully neutral, but Sam had learned to read the disappointment in his Apache father's eyes. "Same story," Aiyana said quietly. "They admit children were taken, but the records are incomplete. Some went to boarding schools back east, others to good Christian families who needed help with farm work." His voice carried barely contained anger. "They speak of my daughter like she was livestock to be distributed." Sam felt his own anger flare. Over the past months they had visited 7 towns, 12 government offices, and countless churches and schools. Always the same pattern. Vague records, bureaucratic shuffling, and the casual assumption that taking Apache children from their families was somehow an act of mercy. The woman at the school board office said something interesting. Sam offered, trying to find hope where little existed. She mentioned a mission school about 50 miles north. San Miguel said they specialized in Indian education and had been operating for almost 4 years. Aiyana's eyes sharpened. 4 years, Itzel was taken 3 winters ago. The timing fits. There's more. She said the school was run by a Father Martinez and that he kept very detailed records of all his charges. Sam paused, choosing his words carefully. She seemed to think he was different from the others, like he actually cared about the children. For the first time in weeks, something like hope flickered in Aiyana's expression. "We go to this San Miguel mission tonight." They made camp in the hills above the mission just as the sun was setting, and what Sam saw through Aiyana's spyglass made his heart ache. The school was larger than he'd expected, a cluster of adobe buildings surrounded by cultivated fields where children worked under the watchful eyes of stern-faced adults. Even from this distance, he could see that most of the children were Indian, Apache, Navajo, maybe some Pueblo peoples. They moved with the careful, beaten-down posture of those who had learned that survival meant invisibility. "There," Aiyana breathed suddenly, his hand tightening on the spyglass. "By the vegetable garden." The girl with the long braid. Sam took the glass and focused where Aiyana was pointing. A girl of about 11 was working among the tomato plants, her movements efficient despite her obvious exhaustion. Her hair was longer than it would have been in Apache tradition, and she wore a simple brown dress instead of traditional clothing. But there was something in the way she moved. The set of her shoulders. "Is it her?" I think so. But she's older. Changed. 3 years in this place." Aiyana's voice trailed off, thick with emotion. "I need to get closer. I need to be sure." They waited until full darkness before making their approach. The mission had minimal security, a single guard who spent most of his time drinking from a bottle hidden behind the chapel. These people felt safe in their righteousness, confident that no one would dare challenge their holy work. Moving through the shadows between buildings, they reached the dormitory where the girls were housed. Through a window, Sam could see rows of narrow beds where children slept under thin blankets. Most looked malnourished, and several were clearly sick. "They're keeping them like prisoners," Sam whispered, his voice tight with anger. "Worse than prisoners," Aiyana replied. "Prisoners know they are captive. These children are being told this is for their own good." A soft sound made them both freeze. Footsteps approaching from the direction of the chapel. A figure emerged from the darkness, and Sam was surprised to see it was a priest, but not the stern, cold official he'd expected. Father Martinez was a small, elderly man with kind eyes and a face lined by years of desert sun. He walked slowly as if his joints pained him and carried a basket of what looked like medical supplies. "Another sick child," he murmured to himself in accented English, then switched to what sounded like Spanish before trying a few words in what Sam recognized as Apache. "Poor little ones, so far from home, so frightened." The priest's genuine compassion was evident in every word, every gesture. This was not a man who enjoyed his role as jailer, but perhaps one trapped by circumstances beyond his control. Aiyana made a decision that would have seemed impossible just months ago. He stepped from the shadows and revealed himself to the priest. "Father Martinez," he said quietly in English, his hands visible and empty. "I am Aiyana of the Chiricahua Apache. I believe you may have my daughter." The priest spun around, his eyes wide with shock. But he didn't cry out or reach for a weapon. Instead, he studied Aiyana's face with the careful attention of a man who had learned to read souls. "You are not here to make war," Father Martinez said finally. "It wasn't a question. I am here for my child. Her name is Itzel. She was taken 3 winters past by soldiers who said she would be educated, civilized." Aiyana's voice was steady, but Sam could hear the years of pain beneath the words. "I have searched for her ever since." Father Martinez was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Come, both of you. There are things we must discuss, and it is not safe to speak in the open." He led them to a small room behind the chapel, lit by a single candle. The walls were lined with books and papers, and Sam could see that many of the documents were written in different languages: English, Spanish, and what looked like several Indian tongues. "I know the child you speak of," Father Martinez said without preamble. "She calls herself Mary now, as they insisted she must, but she whispers her true name in her sleep. Itzel, Rainbow. A beautiful name for a beautiful child." Aiyana's composure finally cracked, and tears ran down his weathered cheeks. "She is here. She is alive. She is here, and alive." The priest paused, choosing his words carefully. "She is not the same child who was brought here. None of them are. The system, it breaks something inside them. They are taught that their old ways are evil, that their families abandoned them, that salvation lies only in forgetting who they were." "But you don't believe that," Sam said suddenly, reading something in the priest's expression. Father Martinez smiled sadly. "No, young man. I believe that God speaks in many languages, and that love is love regardless of the color of skin or the traditions of ancestors. But I am one voice against an institution, and institutions do not change easily." He moved to a cabinet and withdrew a thick ledger, opening it to a page filled with careful handwriting. "Itzel, Mary, is listed as an exceptional student. She has learned English quickly, excels at her studies, and causes no trouble. To the officials who visit, she appears to be a success story." "But," Aiyana prompted, "but I see how she stares at the mountains. I see how she hides bits of colored cloth and stones, trying to maintain some connection to her past. And I have heard her crying at night, calling for her father in a language she is forbidden to speak." The words hit Aiyana like physical blows. Sam reached out and gripped his Apache father's shoulder, offering what comfort he could. "Can we see her?" Sam asked, when Aiyana seemed unable to speak. "That is complicated. If she were to disappear, there would be questions, investigations. The authorities would assume she had been taken by hostile Indians and might use it as justification for further raids on Apache settlements." "Then what do you suggest?" Aiyana asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. Father Martinez was quiet for a long moment, obviously wrestling with a decision that could change all their lives. Finally, he looked up with the expression of a man who had chosen conscience over convenience. "There may be a way, but it will require patience, planning, and considerable risk for all of us. Are you prepared for that?" "I would do anything for my daughter," Aiyana said simply. "And I would do anything for my Apache father," Sam added, meaning every word. The priest nodded, as if he had expected no other answer. "Then let me tell you about the transfer system and how we might use it to bring a little girl home." As Father Martinez outlined his plan, Sam realized they were about to embark on their most dangerous mission yet. This wasn't like hunting outlaws in the desert. This was taking on an entire system of laws, institutions, and deeply held beliefs about civilization and savagery. But as he looked at the hope beginning to kindle in Aiyana's eyes, Sam knew they would do whatever it took. Family was worth any risk, any sacrifice. The war for Itzel's freedom was about to begin, and this time they wouldn't be fighting with guns and knives, but with something far more dangerous to their enemies: love, determination, and the unbreakable bonds that connected father to daughter across years of separation and suffering. The most important battle of their lives lay ahead. The plan Father Martinez proposed was as audacious as it was dangerous. Every few months, Children from San Miguel Mission were transferred to other schools based on their progress and aptitude. A bright child like Itzel might easily be selected for advanced education at a boarding school back east. A journey that would take her through dozens of remote way stations where a careful ambush could look like an Apache raid. The next transfer is in 2 weeks. Father Martinez explained, his weathered hands tracing routes on a hand-drawn map. 6 children are scheduled to go to the Carlisle School in Pennsylvania. I can ensure Itzel is among them. And then, Aiyana asked, his dark eyes studying every detail of the planned route. Then you intercept the wagon at Pine Creek Canyon, 20 miles north of here. It's isolated, with plenty of cover, and the escort will be minimal. 2 soldiers and a civilian driver. They won't be expecting trouble so close to the mission. Sam felt his stomach clench with familiar pre-battle nerves. What about the other children? We can't just leave them. The priest's expression grew pained. That is the most difficult part of this plan. To maintain the deception, it must appear that only 1 child was taken, specifically targeted by relatives who tracked her down. If all 6 disappear, it becomes a major incident. You're asking us to choose, Aiyana said quietly, to save my daughter while leaving 5 other children in captivity. I'm asking you to be practical, Father Martinez replied, but Sam could see the moral struggle in the old priest's eyes. Save who you can, when you can. The system that holds these children is too large to topple in a single stroke. The next 2 weeks passed in careful preparation. They scouted Pine Creek Canyon until they knew every rock and tree, planned escape routes through terrain that would challenge even Apache trackers, and rehearsed the operation until it felt like second nature. But nothing could prepare Sam for the emotional weight of finally seeing Itzel face to face. They were positioned on the canyon rim when the transfer wagon came into view, raising dust in the afternoon heat. Through the spyglass, Sam could see 6 children sitting in the wagon bed, their faces resigned to whatever fate awaited them. And there, third from the left, was the girl who had haunted Aiyana's dreams for 3 years. Itzel had grown taller, but she still carried herself with the unconscious grace that marked her as Aiyana's daughter. Her hair had been cut shorter than Apache tradition would allow, and she wore the simple brown dress of the mission school. But her eyes, those dark, intelligent eyes, were unmistakably her father's. She's beautiful, Sam whispered, feeling his throat tighten with emotion. She looks just like you said she would. Aiyana said nothing, but Sam could see tears tracking down his weathered cheeks. 3 years of searching, 3 years of hope and despair, had led to this moment. The wagon reached the predetermined spot, a narrow section of canyon where the walls rose steeply on both sides. Sam and Aiyana moved into position with the fluid precision of long practice. But this time there was a difference. This wasn't about revenge or justice. This was about love, about bringing a family back together. Sam's job was to create a distraction while Aiyana identified and secured Itzel. They had agreed that minimal violence was essential. Father Martinez was right about the consequences of making this look like a major attack. Sam fired 2 shots into the air, the echoes bouncing off the canyon walls like thunder. The horses reared and whinnied, and the soldiers reached for their weapons while scanning the rim for targets they couldn't see. Apache, the civilian driver shouted, his voice cracking with fear. We're under attack. In the confusion, Aiyana dropped from the canyon wall like a hunting cat, landing silently in the wagon bed. Sam watched through the spyglass as his Apache father moved among the terrified children, searching for his daughter. For a moment their eyes met, father and daughter separated by 3 years of heartbreak, and time seemed to stop. Itzel's mouth opened in shock, then shaped a single word that Sam couldn't hear but could read on her lips. Father. What happened next would be burned into Sam's memory forever. Aiyana reached out to take his daughter's hand, his face radiant with joy and relief, and Itzel pulled away. The girl who had been stolen as an 8-year-old Apache child had become 11-year-old Mary, and she looked at her father with fear and confusion instead of recognition and love. Don't touch me, she said in English, pressing herself against the far side of the wagon. I don't know you. The words hit Aiyana like physical blows. Sam could see his Apache father's face crumble, 3 years of hope dying in an instant. This was the nightmare Father Martinez had tried to prepare them for, that the system designed to kill the Indian and save the man had succeeded too well. But Aiyana was made of stronger stuff than despair could break. He knelt in the wagon bed, making himself small and non-threatening, and began to sing, softly, in Apache, a lullaby Sam had heard him hum during lonely nights around their campfire. The effect on Itzel was electric. Her eyes widened, and her hand went unconsciously to her throat, where Sam could now see a small leather cord, hidden beneath her mission dress, but still there, still connecting her to her past. "I know that song," she whispered in English, then caught herself and looked fearfully at the soldiers who were still trying to locate their attackers. "Yes, little rainbow," Aiyana said softly, still in Apache. "I sang it to you every night, until you were old enough to sing it yourself." Recognition dawned in Itzel's eyes like sunrise after the longest night. "Papa," she whispered, the Apache word slipping out despite years of punishment for speaking her native tongue. This time, when Aiyana reached for her, she didn't pull away. Father and daughter embraced in the bed of that dusty wagon, while bullets whined overhead and soldiers shouted orders, and Sam felt his own eyes burn with tears at the beauty and pain of their reunion. But there was no time for tender moments. The soldiers were getting organized, and soon they would realize the attack was coming from only 1 or 2 people. Sam fired again, keeping them pinned while Aiyana lifted Itzel from the wagons. "I'm scared, Papa," she said in Apache, the words coming back to her, as if the 3 years of separation had never happened. "I know, little rainbow, but you're safe now. You're coming home." They climbed the canyon wall with Itzel between them, Sam providing covering fire while Aiyana helped his daughter navigate the steep rock face. Below them the soldiers had finally organized a pursuit, but they were on foot in rough country where Apache knew every path and hiding place. By sunset they had put 20 miles between themselves and the canyon, and they were deeper in Apache territory than any white pursuit would dare to follow. They made camp in a hidden valley where a spring provided fresh water and the rock walls would hide their fire. It was then, as they sat around the small flames, that the real reunion began. Itzel, Mary, whatever name she chose to use, was caught between 2 worlds in a way that tore at Sam's heart. She spoke English automatically, flinching when Apache words slipped out. She sat stiffly, as she had been taught, instead of relaxing into the comfortable Apache posture Aiyana tried to model for her. Most heartbreakingly, she kept apologizing for speaking Apache, for not recognizing Aiyana immediately, for being afraid, for existing as she was instead of as her father remembered her. "I tried to remember," she said in halting Apache, the words rusty from disuse. "But they said remembering was bad. That you had abandoned me because I wasn't good enough. That the old ways were evil and would send me to hell." Aiyana's jaw clenched with barely controlled fury at what had been done to his child, but his voice remained gentle. "They lied to you, little rainbow. I never left searching for you. Not for a single day. But why didn't you come sooner? Why didn't you save me before they changed me into this thing I've become?" The pain in her young voice was almost too much to bear. Sam found himself speaking before he'd consciously decided to. "Because the world is big and you were hidden by people who thought they were helping you. But he never gave up, Itzel. Your papa never gave up." She looked at Sam with curious eyes. "Who are you? You're not Apache, but you're not like the others either." "This is my son," Aiyana said simply, "not of my blood, but of my heart. His name is Sam, and he helped me find you. Maybe, but I have advantages they don't expect. I can speak Apache fluently. I understand your customs and beliefs, and I know that your people aren't the savage enemies they've been taught to fear." Sam paused, gathering courage for what he had to say next. "I want to become a lawyer." The word hung in the air like smoke. Lawyers were representatives of the system that had stolen Itzel. that had driven Apache families from their ancestral lands, that had broken treaty after treaty with bureaucratic efficiency. A lawyer, Itzel repeated, as if testing the word's taste. There are good lawyers and bad lawyers, just like there are good people and bad people in every tribe. Sam explained. I want to be one of the good ones. I want to help Apache families stay together. Help protect your sacred places. Help make sure what happened to you never happens to another child. Aiyana was quiet for a long time, staring into the distance where hawks circled on thermal currents. Finally, he spoke with the measured cadence that meant he was sharing hard-won wisdom. When I was young, I believed all whites were enemies. They took our land, killed our people, stole our children. I nursed that hatred like a fire in my chest, letting it burn away everything else until I was hollow inside. He looked at Sam with eyes that held depths of pain and healing. Then a white boy asked me for protection, and in protecting him I found something I thought I had lost forever. The ability to love without reservation, to trust without cynicism. You gave me back my humanity, Sam, and through you was able to find my daughter. Papa, Itzel whispered, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. What I'm trying to say, Aiyana continued, is that perhaps the Great Spirit brought us together, not just to heal our own wounds, but to begin healing the wounds between our people. If you can use white man's laws to protect Apache families, if you can be a voice of truth in their councils, then your path is as sacred as any warrior's. The weight of that responsibility settled on Sam's shoulders like a mantle. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. The idea that his life might serve a purpose larger than personal happiness or even family bonds. Where will you go? Itzel asked, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. East, to start. There are schools there, universities where I can study law. Father Martinez gave me letters of introduction. Apparently he knows people who help unusual students find their way. How long? Aiyana asked. I don't know. Years, probably. But I'll come back. This is my home, you're my family. Nothing will ever change that. They spent the next 3 days in preparation, not just gathering supplies for Sam's journey, but performing ceremonies that would bind their family together across whatever distances might separate them. On the final evening, as they sat around their fire watching stars emerge in the desert sky, Itzel presented Sam with a gift that left him speechless, a medicine bag she had sewn herself, decorated with traditional Apache symbols and containing items that held deep spiritual significance. This has sage from our sacred mountains, she explained, her voice steady despite her tears. And a stone from the creek where Papa first found you, and a feather from the hawk that circles our valley. When you're far away, in the white man's cities, these will remind you who you really are. Sam clutched the medicine bag to his chest, feeling the weight of love and trust it represented. I'll treasure it always. Promise me something, Aiyana said, his weathered hand resting on Sam's shoulder. Promise me you'll never let their world make you ashamed of what you learned here. Apache wisdom, Apache values, Apache love. These are gifts, not burdens. I promise. And promise me you'll remember that being a bridge between worlds means standing strong enough that neither side can pull you down. I promise that too. The next morning, as Sam prepared to ride east toward a future none of them could clearly see, Itzel ran to him with something clutched in her small fist. Wait, she said breathlessly. I made this last night. She pressed a small object into his palm. A tiny horse carved from wood, no bigger than his thumb but perfectly detailed. Papa taught me to carve like he taught you to track. This horse will carry your spirit back to us when you're homesick. Sam looked at the carving through blurred eyes, seeing in its graceful lines all the love and skill Itzel had inherited from her father. It's beautiful. Perfect. Not perfect, she corrected with a small smile, but made with love, which is better than perfect. The parting itself was almost unbearably painful. Sam embraced Aiyana, this man who had saved his life and taught him what it meant to be strong and honorable and true. Words seemed inadequate for what lay between them. The bond forged in shared danger, strengthened by mutual respect, and deepened by the love they both bore for Itzel. "You will always be my son," Aiyana said simply. "Distance cannot change that, nor time, nor the color of skin. And you will always be my father," Sam replied. "The one who taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about choice and courage and standing together when the world gets dark." With Itzel, the goodbye was harder still. This girl who had become his sister, his partner in healing, his reminder that love was stronger than any system designed to destroy it. "Don't forget us," she whispered as they held each other tight. "Impossible," Sam whispered back. "You're part of my soul now, both of you." He rode east with the sun climbing toward its zenith, turning once to wave at the two figures standing beside their hidden valley. Aiyana raised his hand in the traditional Apache farewell, while Itzel waved both arms enthusiastically, her flower-braided hair catching the morning light. Then the trail curved around a rocky outcropping, and they were lost to sight. But not lost to heart. Never lost to heart. Years later, when lawyer Samuel Mitchell stood before the Supreme Court arguing for Apache land rights, he would touch the medicine bag Itzel had made him. When he won landmark cases protecting Indian children from forced removal, he would think of Aiyana's patient teaching about justice and honor. When he established schools that honored both Apache and white ways of learning, he would remember the lessons learned in their hidden valley. And when he was very old, sitting on the porch of the law office he had built in Arizona Territory to serve both Apache and white clients, he would tell his own children and grandchildren about the man who had chosen to be his father and the girl who had chosen to be his sister, and how love had triumphed over every force that tried to tear their family apart. The boy who had cried, "They took my father, can you protect me?" had grown into a man who protected others. The Apache warrior who had lost everything had found a way to build something beautiful from the ashes of his grief. The stolen girl had grown into a woman who bridged worlds with grace and wisdom. Three broken people had found each other in the vastness of the Arizona desert, and in choosing to love across every barrier society could erect, they had created something stronger than blood, deeper than tribe, and more enduring than the desert itself. They had created a family, and families, true families, last forever.